It's a brand new season here at On the Path, and we're talking about a heavy topic, y'all. Women as pastors? Question mark? Oh no. Women as pastors exclamation point. That's what we're talking about. Coming up next, we're speaking with my dear friend Kristin Mockler Young. She is a speaker, podcaster, and pastor at Mosiac Church in North Carolina, and she's going to be giving us the nitty and the gritty of what it means to inhabit this leadership role in a male-dominated space, what it means to represent her gender when it's right, when it's wrong, the burden of that. She talks honestly about her journey and her calling and the greatest moments and rewards of her life. How do we identify our call as a pastor? How do we identify call in ministry? How do we understand purpose? So much more. She covers it all. It was unreal. You're going to love this conversation, guys. Available on all podcast platforms. You can watch it in Canada on Yes TV. You can stream it into the castle in Canada. And on the stateside, you can watch it on Pioneer Channel, Roku Channel, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and more, wherever podcasts are available. I will see you on the path.
You're listening to On the Path podcast with Cheryl Nembhard, brought to you by Fight for Freedom. Follow Cheryl Nembhard on all social media platforms.
We are in the classroom of life, y'all. We are learning as we go from incredible teachers who are sharing from not just their mountaintop experiences, but from the hard moments of their life. And today we're talking about an important topic. This is something that I think we don't speak enough about, and there is still a lot of tension, a lot of misinterpretation, confusion, some even strong feelings around this area. We are talking about women as pastors. For some, it might be women as pastors with a question mark. For us, it's women as pastors with an exclamation. And I have an incredible guest. She is a dear friend of mine. From the moment that we connected, we locked eyes. We knew we were part of the same tribe, and we've just been doing life ever since. Can't wait to tell you about her. Kristin Mockler Young is a teaching pastor at Mosiac Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she has a heart for seeing unseen people and using her Instagram feed to help disenchanted Christians, love that word, find hope and joy. As host of the Becoming Church podcast, Kristin engages in nuanced conversations with special guests to equip Jesus followers to live out the call of the church. And she's a diva fashionista. She's hilarious. But this is someone that has really understood what it means in this sort of age to have a social media ministry. I want you to welcome to On the Path, Kristin Mockler Young. Let's go.
Yay! Hello, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Oh man, sis. So listen, and you're rocking it. I for those that can't see, you are missing out.
How do you turn down a bright pink bomber jacket? I mean, come on.
Yes, Kristin, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I think it's we're going to go in some really tough, hard spaces, but we need to go there and we need to
Yeah.
have an honest conversation.
Yeah.
I think the first thing I want to ask you is like, can you share a little bit of your journey of what led you to becoming a pastor?
Sure. Yeah, I was actually, I've been a church girl my whole life. Grew up in the church, always have loved the church, but never actually expected to do ministry as a vocation. I was a kindergarten teacher for, I think, 13 years while I was volunteering, attending church, all of that. And I just found myself in a really toxic season. I had a baby and a toddler, and education had changed in a mighty way, not for the better for me. And so I just was kind of doing some part-time work, and I told my husband, like, we need to figure it out financially, but I am losing my mind. And so when that happened, my church was planting a second campus, and I'd been part of this church since 2006 when we launched. I helped launch it. And all of a sudden, they needed a leader for that campus. And so they were like, Kristin, here's the deal. We know you're going to step up in leadership. You bleed Mosaic green. Like, we know you're going to do all of these things. So come on staff and let us just pay you. And so fast forward, I came on just as the campus director, part-time, went to full-time, they offered me the title of pastor. I said, absolutely not. That is not, I am just a person. Do you not know who I am and what that word is, you know? And so, yeah, after a little while, I really felt like God said to me, hey, you thought you were taking a job, like you thought you were taking your next career step, maybe, but I've actually called you into your next chapter to be in ministry. And so I fought him on that for a while too. And then I got ordained, and here I am.
Goodness gracious. I want to circle back to that because I think that you said something that so many people would resonate with.
Yeah.
You were praying through, thinking about this opportunity, but you didn't want the title pastor. Why?
Gosh, it was so weighty. So again, like I grew up in the Methodist tradition in a pretty conservative church, very conservative home. A pastor like that meant something specific, I mean, even now, I think when we hear the words, pastor, theologian, any of these things, honestly, we picture old white men. Like if we're going to be honest, that is the first image that most people bring to mind. And for me, not only was it that, but it was a very like buttoned up, serious, high, holy, righteous, I'm like, I probably say words I shouldn't say sometimes. And I like to watch The Bachelor, and like I wear press on nails and all of these things that I'm like, these things should disqualify me from being a pastor. I'm not holy enough for this. And that really what it was for me in the initial, like, yeah, I'm not that person.
I just want to bring this to the attention of those that are dialing in with us in this conversation, that everything that you mentioned that you felt was not holy enough was feminine.
Oh my gosh, you are right. And I don't even think I put that together
And that
before.
and that is, and because of the reality is we are the product of like our environment, whether we can acknowledge it or it's unconscious and it's
Yeah,
deep.
yeah.
That sort of bias, that messaging, that thought has been around, that
Yeah.
all things feminine cannot be holy or as
Hmm.
or viewed as serious and deep and holy as men. It's interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and I want to talk about your calling because this story of calling is always important to me. I think people struggle around identifying, am I called to something
Hmm.
versus this is what I like to do, or
Hmm.
I, so tell me a little bit about how did you know, or how do you know
Yeah,
that this is the thing that you're called to do? And then, like, as just put your pastor hat on, how do we figure that out? How do we
sure.
figure out our call?
So for me, I knew it was God because this was not my plan. Like I never planned to be in ministry. I mean, I thought I was either going to go back to teaching kindergarten, or I was going to work at a preschool or do something with little kids, like something that in my brain was like super easy. I'm also very gifted in that. And so I was like, well, that's what I was created for. That was my purpose and my calling. And I think there's a traditional idea too that you only get one, which I had to flip on its head. So yeah, my lead pastors called it out in me. There's four of us that were like the executive team or the lead pastors, and all three of them called it out in me. I just reading scripture, like you can only run from God for so long before you start to see the same things over and over and over again. And so I just kind of knew, and then I actually here's what's crazy. I don't know, a crazy thing. So confirmation for me, I've been prophesied over two times in my life, like twice. Once, I mean, decades apart. And both times people mentioned my feet, which I thought was bizarre. I was like, all right, maybe because I'm a shoe girl, like I had never figured that out. And then as I was really getting closer to accepting that God was calling me to be a pastor, I saw that verse that says, I'm just going to read it to you. It says, how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? How can they believe in him if they've never heard of him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? And then it says, this is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of the messengers who bring the good news.
Come on.
And I was like, oh, that's the thing. Like, that's it. Because my whole heart is to reach people, and it always has been to reach people. But that was my confirmation of just like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, before we even get into the encouraging word for people that are struggling around their call, I heard a
Yeah.
couple of things. I heard, your calling was confirmed by community.
Yes.
Um, I love that people saw that in you, called it out of you, confirmed
Hmm.
it. That's powerful. There was a supernatural sort of like move of God that happened.
Hmm.
For you, it was
Hmm.
some prophecy that then later kind of unraveled and made
Yeah.
sense. There was some scriptural confirmation. And then also I hear like for people that are trying to figure this thing out, because it is layered, guys, trying to sort of
Yeah.
like, what is my calling? It was also like geared around your pain points and your burden. You
Hmm.
have a burden for people,
Yeah.
a burden for them to know the joy and the love of Jesus. You have a burden for community, and
Hmm.
you're also passionate about teaching. So it was all of those things. So there's kind of like these layers to
Yeah.
calling and confirmation. What would you say to someone that's just trying to figure it out? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say do that. I mean, start at those basic levels. I never saw teaching kindergarten and preaching on a Sunday morning as both teaching, like as the same skill. But there is something to a similarity there. I would say start with, like you said, what upsets you, like what really
That's good.
bothers you in a good way that like it won't let go of you. That's probably a place that God is calling you to help heal or to speak into or to bring some life into. And then, yeah, what are your skills? What are you good at? And then being able to look at that in a different way. One of our pastors, we both have teaching as a spiritual gift, but she thought for a long time that she couldn't do it because she never, ever wants to get on stage and preach. But during the pandemic, she became one of our best teachers. We started this thing called morning breath because we would like breathe life into people in the morning through social media lives. And she became one of our best teachers there behind her phone. And so I tell you that to say, like, figure out what your gifts are, but also be open to using them in an absolutely new way. I think that could be part of our calling. And our callings can change, right? I
Mm,
think we get so stuck on what is God's will and what is the one thing. Um, I always go back to like Adam and Eve in the garden, where God did not say, He said, don't eat this tree. He did not say, here is the one thing that is good and right for you. He's like, you have all of these options. You can pick any of these and they're fine. And I think that He actually does the same with us. I think He says, He might close some doors, open some doors, but I think for the most part, God is like, I've gifted you up. I've given you passions. I've wired you up. There are people around you that need me and that need your version of me. And so like, just pick one and take God with you into it. And I don't think you're going to have the wrong calling.
mm, wow. Oh, you've given so many people something to think about there. My goodness. I can't even imagine, friend, what it's like. We talk about many times you and I have shared, and you've been in our platforms with, tons of women leaders and vice versa. And we've
Yeah.
talked about the pressure and the weight of being the only in the room or the
Hmm.
few in the room.
Hmm.
And so when we do get into these spaces, we tend to overwork, we try to prove. There's a lot of things at play, there's a lot of performance pressures that we put on ourselves, and we can end up burning out.
Hmm.
I want to ask you, have you ever, as a pastor, experienced burnout? What was that? How was that? Like, and
Yeah.
how did you pull out of it? And how do we avoid as leaders, like not even just pastors, but just leaders, how do we avoid that? What were the lessons you learned?
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm like, who has not in ministry
Right.
experienced burnout? And if I'm being honest with you, like I teeter on the edge of it quite often. Because Kristin tends to think that she's a superhero, and I forget that I've got to trust. Even this actual very morning, that was my prayer. And I actually asked people to pray for me because I've been on the struggle bus this week. And I was like, I need peace of mind and I need for me to trust God within me because that is part of the problem. I am so afraid that and I say that it's myself, but really like deep down, I think I'm afraid that God's not going to show up. And so therefore I'm like, well, I have to have notes for everything and I have to be crazy organized and I have to like double and triple check all the things. And I have to like have so much control of stuff because I'm afraid that if God, and it's still tied to, right? The fact that like I have to remember that I am a pastor. Like I have to remind myself of this. And I think because I still am so surprised, I have this fear that God is not going to show up, that He's going to look at me and be like, oh, right. you're just you, like just Kristin. So I should go somewhere else and work through someone else. And so for me, the burnout comes in trying to control everything. And listen, ministry, especially right now, we are all short staffed. We are under budgeted. Not all, at least us, a lot of my pastor friends I know. And it makes it hard. Like it's hard when you don't have enough people and you don't have enough money. Um, but we have to put practical steps in place to make sure that we are still protecting,
That's good.
our peace and our minds. And so, I mean, even practical things for me, like I'm a mom, I have two little girls. um, my husband is super supportive, and so we have a really good like co-parenting balance of things. But for me, I have like in the morning and then when they're home, I am off of work because I used to pick them up from school, come home, and then try to go, okay, well, I'm going to wrap up these emails or I'm going to follow up on these texts and I'm going to do these things. And then my kids became a distraction and I would get frustrated at them. Where now I'm like from 4 to 8, when they're up and they're in my house, I am not working. So now if I get an email or a text, barring the like urgent emergency, that is the interruption because my job right now is my family and
Yeah.
calming down for a minute. And I can go back to it when they go to bed if I need to.
Mm. And what's the biggest lesson you learned personally that you will like? And I think we master these lessons so we don't repeat them, right? So, like,
Mm-hmm.
what is the thing you will not repeat to ever get into burnout again?
Um, I think, again, I teeter on the edge of this, but I think what I've learned finally is that my value, my worth is not based on my work. I think I say teeter because I know that's where the enemy comes in to try to throw me off course. But that, like you mentioned earlier, needing to prove ourselves, I think especially as women, there it is. It's a much better time to be a female than it has been in the past. But scarcity is still a thing. Low opportunities are still a thing. Competition is still a thing. And so that need to prove yourself and
Mm.
then tie your value of your who you are and your identity to your work or from what you're getting back out of your work is really, really tempting. And so I think that for me was the biggest lesson, that my value is in who I am as a person first. And
Mm.
I can hopefully do good work out of that.
Oh, I love that. Um, Kristen, what was the hardest? This is a really deep question, personal. I know you're
Okay.
for it. What's the hardest thing you've ever gone through as a pastor that you've experienced?
Well, I know what it is because I'm so tired of grieving this thing. And I've told God 100,000 times I'm so tired of grieving this. But pre-pandemic, I mentioned I came on as the campus pastor. And so I led our campus, and it was a second campus, but it really felt like a church plant. Because it was mine. Those were my people. I would have other staff members come in here and there and help out, but I led that campus, and then we would live stream into our pastor. And for whatever reason, I still don't know, it did not make it through the pandemic. We tried to reopen it, we tried to relaunch it, we tried, evenings instead of mornings or once a month or whatever we could do. And people just didn't come. And so, because of that, and because I'm still connected to the church, and many of them, I would say the majority of them don't attend anymore, I lost what felt like my entire community. I mean, people that we'd done life with for 4 years. They were in our houses. They watched my kids grow up from like babies and toddlers, and we'd have them over for Christmas. I mean, all of these things, and um, I try to believe the best all the time that there were reasons why people left. It's really hard for me not to take it personally and think that somehow it's my fault or they're all mad at me or, you know, um, and it's still hard because I live in a city where they still live, and so I run into them sometimes, and all I know is I just show up still being the pastor, even though they're not part of our church community anymore. But that voice in the back of your head is like, they hate you. You didn't do enough for them, and that's why they didn't come back. And
Mm,
it's
gosh.
a very weird place to be.
Wow. It's so funny. We had this conversation in another space,
Yes.
and a phrase came up that just like it punched our gut. And I called it it was like a spiritual divorce.
Yeah. Yep.
And And you were like, that's it. I've built, we invest in these what we think are long-term
Oh yeah.
relationships. We let our guards down.
Yeah.
We intertwine our families. We start fully trusting and loving, and then boom,
Yeah.
we're no longer speaking. We don't see each other. I don't know where you're at with me. And
Right.
how did you heal from that? And like, maybe more importantly, what's the lesson there that you're learning?
Um, Truth be told, I cried about this literally yesterday. So I
Mm,
think I'm still healing. I think I'm still healing from this. For me personally, because I still love these people. Like I still love, I don't know why it didn't last. I don't know why all the relationships went silent. I truly don't know, and I may never know. And so one of the lessons that I'm learning is just to try to let that go and not carry the guilt of thinking that it's my fault, because I have a deep seated fear of rejection. And I think that that's what it goes back to is the enemy wants to tell me I was rejected by all these people that I loved for so long, that I still love. But also for me, and I think this might just be me specifically, but God has shown me over and over again that he wired me up to love people. And so I almost feel like this was God's way of saying, like, if you can make it through that, then like all the other hurts, all the other heartbreaks, all the other people that leave your church. We're in a very transient city. It's like a revolving door of people. So this again is not even the first time or the last time, you know. And for me, I just felt like God was saying, like, I wired you up to love people hard and fast because that's what they need. And so if you can just persevere and hang in there and trust that I'm going to put the pieces of your heart back together every single time, like, this is why I called you into ministry. I need you to be this person for however many people I put in your path. And I don't understand it. And sometimes I don't like it, but I fully believe that I got that from God. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that image of your heart shattering and breaking with every severed, broken, distant relationship and healing again and breaking again. The amount of resilience and thick skin
Mm,
that is needed for this journey. It's unbelievable.
yeah.
And then also the pressure, I want to talk quickly, the pressure of sometimes being one or the few in the room.
Hmm.
And when we talk about pain points and things that really grip your heart, one of those things I know, even connected to the pandemic, is the need to really advocate for diversity, for
Yeah.
unity, for racial reconciliation. It's a big thing we know in the
Hmm.
States, and a bigger work I believe that the Big C Church is called to.
Yeah.
You know, the church that you serve at is Mosaic. I just want to give them a shout out.
Yes.
Mosaic, what's Mosaic in North Carolina.
Yep.
Diversity, multiculturalism, social justice are big, big pillars there. Why
They
does
are.
it matter so much to you, to your church? And
Yeah.
what is your message to the Big C Church around that?
Yeah. I mean, our Mosaic was born out of diversity. Our lead pastor is from Pakistan. He grew up Muslim and then he came to the States and he married a white girl. So it is led by a very biracial couple. So it always was going to be important to us. But yeah, I mean, really, like, more and more, even post pandemic, we have we just believe like this is what the church is supposed to be. Like, this is what heaven is going to look like. Revelation talks about how when we get there, and who knows what heaven's going to be like, but I fully believe that it's going to be open to everyone, to all people, every tribe, every person, every language. Our catchphrase, if you will, for years was hope for all. Hope for all, because we believe that hope is for all and not just for some. And a lot of churches out there, and this is what I would say to the Big C Church, is that our job is to give access to all people to Jesus. And the second that we restrict access from people because they vote differently from us, because they look differently from us, because they live a different lifestyle from us, whatever it is, we are getting in the way of Jesus. Like, I don't know about y'all. That is not where I want to be. I don't want to be standing between Jesus and people that need him. And so Acts 15 even says, it's, I mean, paraphrase, it says, don't make it difficult. Like, don't make it difficult for people to come to the Lord. Well, then that means everybody's got to be included. And it takes intentionality. Like, it really does take intentionality. I mean, on our staff, on our stages, there's a very big difference between performative diversity and intentional diversity. And if you think there's not a difference, then you might be leaning towards performative diversity. You know, if there's one person in every photo, or you're like got one person on stage that isn't white or isn't whatever your demographic is, it's not exactly it. You know, it's got to be more, I believe, and at Mosiac, we believe it's even more than just race and culture. I mean, we've got age, we've got lifestyle, we've got single parents, we've got divorced people, like pretty much any misfit group that would be shunned out of another church. We're like, come on in with us, because we believe that hope is for all people. Jesus died for all people, and that has to look diverse, because people are diverse.
Oh gosh, I love you. I love everything about you. Goodness gracious. Listen, we'll do kind of 1.5 questions before we wrap
Okay.
up. To the woman who is struggling to answer the call, is thinking that it's too hard, questioning their gift, whether their calling, whether it's good, holy, right.
Yeah.
Struggling with all of the misogyny, the patriarchy. Just what would you say to her?
Yeah.
We do have incredible men that are listening, but let's just throw a lifeline to a woman right now.
Yeah, I would say go back to that verse that I shared earlier, right? Like, who's going to reach them unless they're called, or who's going to hear about people unless we go and tell them? Beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. And when we think about feet and people running with the good news, how do you not think about the first Easter Sunday when Jesus resurrected and he talked to the women? At the time, women's opinions did not count. They had no value. I mean, right now in the Middle East, like, there are so many Muslim places and countries where women's opinions still don't count. I think it takes like 2 women to equal the value of 1 man when it comes to testifying and things like that. And it was a very similar thing back in the day. Like, Jesus was doing something revolutionary by how much he engaged women and trusted women and brought them along. And so for the women that are trying to figure out what their calling is, maybe it's ministry, maybe it's not, I would just say, remember that Jesus empowered women. He trusts women to take his message forward, to take his ministry forward. So he trusts you. And so if Jesus trusts you, you can trust yourself. Like, go and do it. We have to take our version of Jesus to the world. Can you imagine if we only heard from men? Men are great. We would miss like 50% of the perspective of God that he wants to, be seen in the world.
Tell us how we can reach you on social media, please, and website.
Yes, I am on most social media platforms, but I live on Instagram at Kristin Mockler Young. You can also find me at turningthegem.com or the Turning the Gem Substack, or Becoming Church podcast, which I host and also love.
Love you so much, sis. Thank you for being
love
on
you.
the path.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to On the Path podcast with Cheryl Nembhard, brought to you by Fight for Freedom. Please like, download, and subscribe. This has been an Exousia Media production.